If you were to take the aggressive temperament of a wild boar, the crushing jaws of a hyena, and the sheer size of a buffalo, and then mix them together in a biological blender, you would get the Entelodont. Often nicknamed the hell pig or the Terminator pig, this creature is the stuff of nightmares. It possessed a skull adorned with bizarre bony lumps and a mouth filled with teeth designed to pulverize bone. But despite the nickname, this was no pig. It was a distant cousin of the hippopotamus and the whale, a scavenger king that ruled the Oligocene plains through sheer intimidation. This is the story of the ugliest, meanest, and most successful bully to ever walk the American Badlands.
The story of the Entelodont begins with a case of mistaken identity that has persisted for over a century. When the first fossils of these creatures were unearthed in the fossil-rich beds of North America and Europe, scientists were baffled. They looked at the heavy, barrel-shaped bodies, the cloven hooves, and the omnivorous teeth. The conclusion seemed obvious. These were ancient, monstrous pigs. Consequently, they earned the popular monikers hell pigs or Terminator pigs. These names stuck because they perfectly captured the terrifying aura of the animal. It is easy to sell the public on the idea of a demon pig. But as we peeled back the genetic and anatomical layers, a shocking truth emerged. Entelodonts are not pigs. In the great family tree of artiodactyls, the even-toed ungulates, they sit on a completely different branch. Their lineage is a testament to the incredible power of convergent evolution, where two unrelated animals evolve similar shapes to solve similar problems. The Entelodont looked like a pig because it lived like a pig, rooting for food and scavenging, but its bloodline tells a different story. Their closest living relatives are not the swine rolling in the mud on a farm. Instead, they are the hippopotamus and, incredibly, the whales. This revelation fundamentally changes how we view them. They belong to a group called Cetancodontomorpha. Millions of years ago, this lineage split. One branch returned to the water, trading legs for flippers to become the blue whales and orcas we admire today. Another branch became the semi-aquatic river giants of Africa, the hippos. But the Entelodonts chose a third, more radical path. They became the tanks of the dry land. They represent a unique evolutionary experiment. What happens when you take the massive, bone-crushing potential of the hippo lineage, strip away the need for water, and adapt it for a life of running, scavenging, and fighting on the open plains? They are, in essence, whales that decided to walk, and they were angry. To understand why the Daeodon, the largest and last of the Entelodonts, was so feared, we have to look at its anatomy in detail. It is, without exaggeration, one of the most intimidating biological designs ever produced by mammalian evolution. A full-grown Daeodon was a titan. It stood nearly 2 meters tall at the shoulder. This puts it eye to eye with a modern human, but with a body mass comparable to a bison or a white rhinoceros. But unlike a bison, which carries its head low to graze on grasses, the Daeodon carried its head high, like a war banner. And what a head it was! The skull of a Daeodon is the stuff of nightmares. It could reach nearly 1 meter in length. It was enormous, disproportionately large for its body, looking like a giant hydraulic press attached to a muscular neck. To support this massive, heavy skull, the animal evolved a high hump over its shoulders, formed by elongated neural spines on its vertebrae. This hump anchored immense neck muscles, allowing the Daeodon to wield its head like a sledgehammer. But it wasn't just the size of the skull. It was the architecture. The Entelodont skull is famous for its bizarre, bony protrusions that give it a warty, goblin-like appearance. Immense, wing-like flanges of bone, known as jugal bosses, flared out from its cheekbones like the cow-catcher on a locomotive. Knobby bumps ran along the underside of its jaw. For a long time, paleontologists debated the function of these strange structures. While they certainly played a role in muscle attachment, modern analysis suggests a more violent purpose. These bony warts and flanges were armor. They were thickened shields designed to protect the animal's eyes and throat during combat. They were also likely covered in thick, calloused skin, used for display, a way for two males to size each other up without firing a shot. The mouth itself was a toolkit of destruction. Unlike true predators like cats that specialize in slicing meat, or true herbivores like cows that specialize in grinding grass, the Entelodont upgraded the primitive full set of teeth to lethal levels. It had massive, tusk-like canines for stabbing. It had interlocking incisors at the front for ripping flesh, and in the back it had flat, crushing molars the size of fists. This dentition reveals the creature's true nature. It wasn't a picky eater. It was an opportunistic omnivore that could eat anything it wanted, from roots and tubers to the shattered bones of other megafauna. When we look at the heavy, robust skeleton of the Daeodon, it is easy to assume it was a slow, lumbering beast. But this is where the Entelodont pulls another trick from its evolutionary sleeve. Despite its tank-like build, the Daeodon was built for speed. If you look at its legs, you will see they are surprisingly long and slender. The bones of the lower leg were fused together, a classic adaptation seen in cursorial or running animals like horses. It walked on two toes, reducing the weight of the foot and allowing for a longer stride. This combination of heavy armor and sprinter's legs made the Daeodon a terrifying paradox. It was a heavy-duty scavenger that could likely run down prey over short distances. It roamed the vast open scrublands of the Oligocene, not by plodding along, but by trotting efficiently, covering huge distances in search of food. This mobility and sensory power were crucial. The Badlands environment was harsh, with food sources scattered far and wide. The Daeodon needed to patrol a vast territory. Its long legs allowed it to spot circling vultures in the distance and gallop to the scene of a kill before the carcass was picked clean. It was the first responder of the prehistoric world, arriving at the scene of death not to help, but to steal. The Oligocene epoch, roughly 30 million years ago, was a harsh time. The lush tropical forests were receding, replaced by open scrubland and dust-choked plains. In this unforgiving environment, food was not always guaranteed. You couldn't afford to leave calories on the table. This is where the Entelodont found its niche. While they could hunt, the Daeodon was built to be the supreme scavenger. In the ecological hierarchy, it was a kleptoparasite, a professional bully. Imagine the scene. A pack of hyenodon, the dominant wolf-sized predators of the time, has managed to take down a primitive rhino. They have done the hard work. They are exhausted. And then the ground begins to shake. Out of the brush steps a Daeodon. It towers over them. It opens its mouth, revealing a gape that can stretch nearly 90 degrees, displaying a cavern of teeth. The hyenodons have a choice: fight a 2,000-pound tank with a head made of solid bone, or abandon their kill. Most of the time, they ran. Once the Daeodon claimed the carcass, it didn't just eat the meat. This is where the ultimate bone-crushing machine title becomes literal. Most predators leave the skeleton behind because bones are hard to break and dangerous to eat. but the Daeodon used its massive back molars and immense jaw pressure to perform osteophagy, or bone eating. It would position the femur of a rhino between its back teeth and clamp down. The sound of shattering bone would have echoed across the Badlands. It could pulverize the skeleton, accessing the nutrient-rich marrow that no other animal could reach. It was a biological trash compactor, ensuring that absolutely nothing went to waste. The life of an Entelodont was defined by violence, specifically against its own kind. The fossil record gives us a gruesome insight into their social behavior. When paleontologists examine Entelodont skulls, they frequently find something disturbing: healed puncture wounds. These are deep gouges in the bone, specifically clustered around the eyes, the nose, and the throat. When these wounds are digitally measured, they match perfectly with the teeth of other Entelodonts. These animals were brawlers. They engaged in violent intraspecific combat, engaging in face-biting. Imagine two massive Daeodons standing mouth to mouth, snapping and lunging, trying to clamp their jaws around the opponent's face. This explains the bizarre armored cheekbones. Those flanges acted as a shield, stopping an opponent's canine teeth from crushing the eye socket. It was a brutal, high-stakes form of combat. The loser could be left blinded or with a shattered jaw, which meant a slow, agonizing death by starvation. The Badlands of North America were a gladiatorial arena, and the Daeodon was a fighter that wore its scars with pride. This suggests a solitary, highly territorial existence where meetings between individuals were rare and often catastrophic. However, no reign lasts forever. As the Oligocene transitioned into the Miocene, the climate shifted, becoming cooler and drier. This sparked a botanical revolution, the spread of grasses. New types of silica-rich grasses appeared, creating vast, open prairies. This change in terrain favored a new type of herbivore. The primitive camels and horses evolved longer legs, becoming faster, more agile, and more efficient at processing the tough grass. The Daeodon, built for power and short bursts of aggression, found itself outpaced. It could no longer ambush the faster herbivores, and scavenging became harder as the herds moved faster and further. Simultaneously, a new threat arrived from across the Bering Land Bridge: the amphicyonids, or bear dogs. These were large, intelligent, and versatile predators that combined the strength of a bear with the speed and pack mentality of a wolf. They hunted in organized groups, taking down the new, faster prey that the Daeodon couldn't catch. And because they hunted in packs, they could stand their ground against a solitary Entelodont. The hell pigs found themselves squeezed from both sides. Their food was running away, and new, more efficient rivals were outcompeting them for the scraps. The brute force strategy that had served them so well for millions of years was becoming obsolete. The age of the tank was ending. The age of the runner was beginning. Around 19 million years ago, the last of the Entelodonts vanished from the fossil record. The Daeodon, the dreadful tooth, finally succumbed to the relentless march of time. It is easy to look at the skull of a Deodon in a museum and see a monster. It is easy to call it ugly, grotesque, or a nightmare. We tend to judge extinct animals by human standards of beauty, favoring the sleek lines of a cat or the majesty of a mammoth. But if we strip away our aesthetic bias, we see the Entelodont for what it truly was: a masterpiece of survival engineering. Every lump on its face, every tooth in its jaw, and every pound of muscle on its frame served a specific purpose. It was designed to survive in a world that was actively trying to kill it. The Entelodonts were not mistakes. They were highly successful animals that reigned for over 20 million years. They remind us that in the game of evolution, beauty is irrelevant. The only thing that matters is efficacy. The Daeodon was the ultimate anti-hero of the prehistoric world. It wasn't the noble hunter or the gentle giant. It was the ugly, angry, bone-crushing survivor that refused to die quietly. And while they are gone, their legacy remains in the fossilized bones that still bear the scars of their brutal lives, reminding us of a time when the American Badlands were ruled by a king with a face only a mother, or perhaps a whale, could love. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the brutal world of the hell pigs, make sure to subscribe to the Extinct Echoes. And let us know in the comments, in a fight over a carcass, who do you think would win? A solitary Daeodon or a pack of hungry bear dogs?